often do visitors to this tourist destination unknowingly interact with a ghost?
Could the strange banging sounds throughout be supernatural in origin?
Do the shadows of former crew still wander the empty corridors?
Find out the answers to these questions and more as we uncover the coastal hauntings and history from the USS Lexington in Corpus Christi, Texas.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Erica.
And this is The Haunted Atlas, a Haunted US podcast.
In the interest of fully exploring history of certain locations, the Haunted Atlas may discuss sensitive or disturbing topics. Listener discretion is advised.
Anchored to Texas's coastline, the famous Blue Ghost has become a popular tourist stop. Though not entirely ethereal in nature, the Blue Ghost is a nickname afforded to the USS Lexington, a nod to its bluish-gray exterior. However, you'd be mistaken if you thought it was entirely without a supernatural element as well. With a history of paranormal claims nearly as long as its naval record, Texas's Blue Ghost is certainly said to be haunted. The USS Lexington is a massive ship. It sits at 870 feet long, 93 feet wide, and can hold 2,600 sailors.
Oh, that helps, because the first two dimensions I was like, well, I really wish I had some kind of context to put that into. 2,600 sailors?
Yeah, that's a ton of people on one ship. It was used in the Pacific theater of World War II as an Essex-class aircraft carrier. Initially, the ship was actually named the USS Cabot, as the USS Lexington already existed at the time. However, at the Battle of the Coral Sea, the first USS Lexington sank, and this ship was renamed in honor of the ship that sank.
See, now I didn't know that ships could be named other ships' names. In my head, I had thought that it was like, once a ship has a name, that's kind of it.
I also thought that was the case.
Yeah.
But I think in this case, it was so new that they just renamed it in memory. It was first put into service in 1943, 2 years after the initial build had begun in 1941. And there was tragedy surrounding the ship from the beginning, with notable Iowan collegiate football star and 1939 Heisman Trophy winner turned serviceman Niall Kinnick crashing into the sea while training to fly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's very sad.
Yeah, yes.
However, the ship itself proved a formidable force. The ship was involved in raids on Wake Island and Marshall Islands in 1943, so it was put into service and immediately started to be of service. In December of that year, the ship's planes helped to sink a cargo ship and down 30 fighter jets.
The ship's planes?
Yeah, because remember, it's an aircraft carrier, so it has that really long deck so that the planes can take off from the ship in the middle of the ocean.
Well, that's a really big feat then. That's a lot of fighter planes.
Yeah. Eventually, the Japanese struck back, successfully hitting the ship with a torpedo and killing 9 sailors in the process. But the ship managed to make it back to Pearl Harbor despite the hole in the side.
That makes sense to me, funny enough, because 9 out of 2,600 people dying is terrible. Of course, every person's life is worth an insurmountable amount. But 9 out of 2,600, it couldn't have hit somewhere super crucial, I'm assuming.
Okay, that's a good point. Because I was like, how would you know that a ship could get back to Pearl Harbor despite having a hole in its side? But that's a really good point. Because there would be more tragedy if it was a significant area. Yeah. That's a good thought. I thought you were going to hit me with some weird physics of weird ship. It didn't take long to fix the ship once it got back to the harbor. And in 1944, the USS Lexington returned to service. The ship continued to aid in attacks in the Central Pacific and was not struck again. The Japanese erroneously listed the ship as sunk in battle, and this is where the ship earned the nickname of the Blue Ghost, because despite it being claimed to be sunk, it continued to serve.
That is so interesting that they auto-claimed it as sinking without even confirmation of it sinking.
Right. I wonder if it is truly that they didn't know that it wasn't sunk, or if they were doing it for propaganda purposes.
Oh, that's a really good theory. Yeah. Maybe they did know, technically.
Yeah. Because if you think about it, there's been this ship that has killed downed these fighter jets, and it might be beneficial to say, hey, we finally got it.
Yeah.
The next stop was the Battle of the Philippine Sea, where Allied forces downed 300 Japanese planes in just one day.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and that's not all from the USS Lexington.
Right.
But it was a part of it. And from there, the USS Lexington went on to assist in many more battles, playing a significant role in many. Following the war, the USS Lexington remained in the Pacific to conduct air patrols of Japan. The ship was not active for the Korean War, but did participate in smaller scale activities like search and rescue operations through the 1950s.
Okay.
In the 1970s, the ship was used as a training carrier for the Vietnam War. And it was so successful in the trainings that it did that it continued to be used for trainings even after the war ended.
That's so cool. It's been around for a really long time at this point.
Yeah, and it really turned it around because if you think it was commissioned back in 41
Right.
and went into service in 43 and there were those deaths associated with young pilots, it's really turned it around to now it's regularly used for training. The USS Lexington was the last Essex-class carrier in service after other ships were decommissioned in 1976. Fun fact, in 1980, the Lexington became the first U.S. naval ship to have women aboard.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yes, it's also way more recent than I thought.
Okay, yeah, you're right. I forgot we were talking about the 1980s.
Yeah, but it is a cool piece of history about this ship. Finally, after 48 years of service, the ship was decommissioned in 1991. The ship was donated to the city of Corpus Christi, where it could serve as a museum. It has been there for over 30 years now, with tons of tourists flocking each year.
Well, that whole town is like beautiful. I was doing some research into it, and first of all, they ended up naming the town just because they needed an easier way to postmark their letters, by the way. This was like an unnamed town, I guess, just for a while.
How does that even happen? Do
I
you
don't
just have
know.
a circle on a map?
Yeah, like I don't even know kind of how they referred to it. I just remember reading on their site that they named it because it would be easier for postal mail, which is interesting.
That's so interesting.
But there's so much there, which is why that surprised me too, because I was like, there's just like so much to do.
Like historical sites?
So it's like near the water, there's like water activities, and then they have all these tourist things and museums, and it's just like, there's a lot of culture there.
That's really cool. I mean, I guess it makes sense that it was placed there then. I was wondering why you would donate a ship to a city.
Yeah.
Just randomly, but it makes sense if it has a lot of other draws. Tourists to the USS Lexington definitely leave with stories of the ship's history, but some visitors leave with stranger tales. Over the years, the aptly named Blue Ghost has gained a reputation for being haunted.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey everyone, Brandon here from Haunted US with a few announcements. First, I just wanted to say thank you for listening to the Haunted Atlas. We appreciate your support. If you'd like to see the podcast grow, the best way to help out would be to share it with a friend or write a review on the podcast platform of your choice. Coming up this Thursday, we visit Nemacolin Castle in Brownsville, Pennsylvania, to learn about a vivid apparition that supposedly appears in photographs and to try to find the phantom who is said to inexplicably move objects in the castle library. Then, next Thursday, we'll stop for a bite at Four Paws Restaurant in St. Paul, Minnesota, an historic fine dining establishment where the spirit of a former servant and center of a heated scandal is still seen near the third floor window where her life ended tragically. Both Nemacolin Castle and Four Paws Restaurant will be available on hauntedus.com. Now let's hear more from the Haunted Atlas team on the ghosts aboard the USS Lexington.
With the nickname of the Blue Ghost, it's only appropriate that this ship is haunted. Arguably the most famous ghost on board has been affectionately named Charlie.
Oh.
He's said to reside in the engine room. Tourists actually see and interact with Charlie, with many people saying he is incredibly informative and a great tour guide.
A tour guide? Like they speak with him?
Yes.
Oh, that's so cool.
I just think it's incredible to have not only a full body apparition, but one that is so realistic and interacting with people so much.
Yeah.
To the degree that people that work there know that Charlie is leading tours, you know?
Right.
The only problem, of course, is that there's no tour guide actually by that name.
Oh,
He's said to wear an era-specific Navy uniform and provide a wealth of information to visitors, so he just looks like someone that's dressed up.
yeah.
And I wonder if he knows that he's a ghost and loved the ship and wants to share the story, or if he doesn't know.
I almost asked that right away of like, do we think that he doesn't know that he's passed on? And so in some capacity that just makes him able to interact with people more?
That
in
could
a
be
way?
the case. My theory was that he does know. He just is very passionate.
Yeah, which would also be nice.
Yeah. I mean, you got to do something to fill your time.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible that he's just passionate and loved his service. He's showing up in a way that isn't scary and isn't even perceivable to the people that are seeing him, which is
Right.
very interesting to me. Because I know we talk a lot about effort of ghosts and how they like to show themselves. And I would imagine this would take a lot of effort if you're operating with that assumption.
Yes. And this is such a different trope in my head compared to, how some people see spirits on battlefields and they think that they're reenactors of that time period. This is just so different because it's not like he's just going through the motions of his life like the reenactors or
Right.
spirits are on a battlefield. It's like genuinely interacting with people, forming new connections and doing new things.
Right. That's what I was thinking. He's not parroting the same information over and over. He's answering questions.
Yeah.
That's really interesting to me. And it makes me wonder if the veil is just thin in general on the Lexington, because it has been associated with a lot of death, not necessarily on the Lexington, but in general. Like they did down a lot of planes.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's just one of those locations that you hear about where the veil is thin and it's easier for spirits to cross.
I wonder if someone who knew that this was a spirit on the ship pointed out that he was a spirit to him
Oh, that would be interesting.
and like see what would happen.
I didn't see anything about that, but I wonder, what would he say?
Right. At that point, you'd be able to tell if he knows because at some level, he'd probably react to what you're saying.
We have to go to Corpus Christi.
Yeah.
That's a really good theory. I wonder why no one's tried that yet.
I know. I'm wondering seriously if like somehow he's only presenting to people who have never heard this story or like are not into the paranormal.
Could be. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you don't know the story, you would just assume he's a tour guide and you're not necessarily going to go back down
Right.
when someone says he's a ghost.
Right.
That would be interesting. It would be interesting to test it with multiple people. Here's someone that knows the story. Here's someone that doesn't know the story. What if you don't know the story, see him, come back, we tell you the story, and you go back to the room?
Yeah.
Do you see him again? Is it one-off? There's a lot of ways you could test this. That would be really interesting.
It would be, yeah.
He is not the only haunting aboard the ship, because there are some general hauntings as well. And the first is an auditory haunting. Visitors and workers alike have reported the sound of sprinting footsteps across the decks, even though no one is there. And I think it's interesting because it's not just walking, it's sprinting, which is a
Yeah.
distinct sound. And I think with walking, you could say, okay, you think no one's there. Maybe someone is there. But with sprinting, it's highly unlikely that someone is sprinting, you're missing them chronically.
Yeah.
And, I think it has to be paranormal.
Right. And the ship was so big that it does make sense to me that, if the spirits of these crewmen are still there, they are trying to run back and forth. If the ship was that big, they might not have had enough time to just walk to their next post.
Right. And if you think of all of the combat that it saw, it makes sense for them to have a sense of urgency.
Yes.
Additionally, there are sometimes shadow figures that accompany the sound of the footsteps. So imagine seeing like a shadowy figure sprinting and hearing it.
Yeah.
But I do wonder what the lighting situation is on this ship, because I think in low light, it could be really hard to discern shadow figure from a shadowed person
Yeah.
if you're on the deck outside.
Oh, definitely.
Not saying that people that work there or visitors are sprinting across the deck, but, I always like to be skeptical of things. There are actually even more auditory hauntings. People report hearing disembodied voices and the sound of gunshots. And with the history of this ship, those sounds are not surprising to me.
Right.
Specifically in the galley, people report the sound of crashes and bangings, almost as if someone's still cooking.
I was going to ask what a galley is. Is that
Yeah.
like the kitchen?
Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of cool though. Like pots and pans banging together.
Yeah. And I wonder, again, being skeptical, when are they hearing this? If it's a rocky day, I mean, the ship is in water.
Right.
If it's a rocky day, then yes, maybe things are banging together. But in addition to the banging, some people report that it will actually smell like people are cooking.
Oh, that is really interesting.
It is, because I'm normally skeptical of scents like smoke, you know,
Yeah.
because some locations really hold that scent, especially if there's something like wood paneling. But this one is almost less likely to me. To have a scent of food still lingering in an old kitchen where I'd imagine it's primarily metals, I think that's really unrealistic that it's not paranormal.
I agree because, I know really nothing about food preservation, but I'm assuming if the smells are like coming from the wall somehow, and we're in the 2000s, the 2020s at this point, that would probably be gross. I don't
Right.
think you would like smell good food coming from the walls.
Right, that was my thought. After 30 years of it being stationed without being in service and theoretically not using the kitchen, I cannot imagine that the people running it would let a scent like that linger.
Yeah.
Especially if visitors are smelling it.
Yes.
Like you're saying, it's probably disruptive. So I think that's paranormal. And I think it's really interesting that in both of these cases of auditory hauntings, there's something that takes it a step further. Whereas we might otherwise be able to write it off, it gives it a lot more credit because of the other things that are happening. Workers at the museum report that small objects do go missing. And these can be anything from pen caps to paper clips. They move from one spot to another, often appearing in strange locations. And to me, this sounds like the sailors trying to keep the area tidy.
Yeah. I was almost surprised when you said paper clips and pens because I was almost expecting it to be more ship central, like the items that they're grabbing to be like more useful on a ship. I mean, of course, pens and paper clips are useful, but hearing that it's just pens and paper clips, I don't think they're moving them to use them.
No.
You know?
I think it's about keeping it tidy. I'm sure it's also limited what's available to them because it's not a functioning warship anymore.
Right.
But anybody that knows about the armed services knows that you have to keep things very clean. So I think it would make sense. They're like, oh my gosh, this box of paper clips, this pen, like we're going to come get an inspection, or I don't know what it's called.
Yeah.
And our station's not clean. We need to clean it up. We need to move this. So I think that that's probably the reasoning behind that. Normally, when I see, things moving on their own paranormal, I almost always think it's a trickster spirit, but I don't think in this case it is.
No, I don't think so either. I think you're right. There is a logical reason for them to be moving stuff other than just like joking around with people.
Right. And it doesn't seem like a very jokey place. Not to say
Yeah.
that there's not happiness and positivity, because of course we already said we think Charlie loves it there. But this was a very serious warship.
Right.
There are paranormal tours and even overnight investigations available here, so you could spend all night with Charlie if you want.
Oh, that would be so great.
I wonder, though, if he would present at an overnight investigation or if he only shows up during the day when he can kind of blend in more.
Oh, yeah. I honestly, if it was an overnight investigation, I almost could see him coming out and being like, hello? Like, what are you doing here?
That would be cool.
Yeah.
That would be really cool. The ship has even been featured on paranormal shows, including Ghost Hunters. So if you are interested, you can go down to Corpus Christi and try to visit Charlie. And if you've been, we would love to hear your stories from the USS Lexington. You can email your stories to the team at hauntedus.com and include Haunted Atlas episode 19 in the subject, or you can find us on Instagram at hauntedus. Tune into our next episode to see where we drop the pin on our adventure across the haunted US. This episode of the Haunted Atlas was presented by Sarah Sweeney and Erica Barrett. It was researched by Sarah Sweeney, supported by research from Haunted US head writer Mitch Goth, with production assistance by David Sweeney and music by Colleen Johnson. Our executive producer is Brandon Rugsey. Haunted Atlas is a production of Haunted US. Visit hauntedus.com for more information.